And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winick. I am the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage, and you're joining us on our podcast today, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today, my guest is Shane Green. I've known Shane for, probably over 10 years now. Shane's the author of an amazing book that came out about a year and a half ago called Culture Hacker. He's the CEO of SGEi, which trains professionals who inspire iconic brands. So he's trained the NBA in customer service, W Hotels, NetJets, MGM Resorts, BMW. He's done some television work, a speaker around the globe. He's been in this content space for a long, long time in a variety of ways. So thanks for joining us today, Shane.
No problem. Nice to kind of be here. After that introduction, I'm exhausted myself with all that stuff.
Let's talk about your journey, because your journey is an interesting one in terms of the expertise in hospitality, really on the ground there, and how that's evolved for you over the years. So maybe let's go backwards in time a little bit and tell us a little bit about how it started for you in hospitality and where it is now and the journey along the way.
Yeah, I mean it's been a bit of a crazy journey. So like all New Zealanders, we get kicked out of our country at 21 and get told to go and travel the world. And that big OE, we're basically given visas to go anywhere and everywhere. That's why everywhere you go, you find a New Zealander sitting in some pub somewhere. So we get sent around the world. I was fortunate to come to the US, and I was probably more fortunate that within sort of arriving here the first 6 months, I got a job at the Ritz-Carlton in California. But sort of getting part of that, I spent the next 9 years with the Ritz-Carlton Hotel Company, which, for all intents and purposes, is probably one of the best training grounds, to learn about customer service. But it's even evolved more than that, really, understanding about, culture, leadership, and, just how to treat people right.
Well, let me just to put that in perspective for a moment, Shane, because I don't think most people know this. In every organization, training is clearly a cost center. Ritz-Carlton was one of the few that turned their training center in Maryland or DC or whatever it was into a profit center. You want to just touch on that for a moment, because it's a fascinating case study.
Well, and again, I think it's an interesting case study only because I don't understand why more HR teams and great organizations aren't becoming profit centers, because there's a real opportunity out there. Ritz-Carlton leveraged its best practices and training, but really it's expertise around culture, around leadership, around developing world-class service organizations. And of course, when you do something really well, everybody wants to know the secret sauce. So what they were able to do and what they recognized is that they were able to create their own version sort of the university, very similar to the Disney sort of model, where obviously organizations get to go and sort of pick their brains and sort of get the download. I think, what's most interesting is you sort of evolve over the years, and even meeting some, people out there in the world. They think that once they go to one of these universities, Disney, Ritz, Zappos, and all of that, they get a little sprinkling of the secret sauce, and all of a sudden they're going to turn their company or culture or customer experience into that. It's not quite as easy as that, but it's a pretty good place to get some good ideas.
Exactly. So you've got your hospitality experience at Ritz-Carlton, and then what happens from there?
So then my entrepreneurial spirit sort of kicked in, and I thought I should start a company, not really knowing what company would be. But it was funny at the time with Ritz-Carlton, I was training in Asia, helping them to open up hotels, having a pretty good time over there. So I realized there was an ability that I could probably speak halfway decently. The accent probably helped. And as I said, I had a little bit of knowledge, around customer service. So I started my first business, which was a customer service training organization, with the goal of really just focusing on helping small hotels to sort of elevate their service. And I think, as you sort of, most people probably listening out there knows, but it took a while for this to kick in with me. But as we're out there doing a lot of customer service-based training, what we soon recognized is that, a good training event, and I'll call it an event, where you get people in and you deliver a great experience to them, that it has a pretty short-term effect, which means it really doesn't do a lot of damage or a lot of positive stuff unless it's built, or unless there's some socialization, coaching, and different things built around it. So I think there's been an evolution over the years.
Let me touch on that for a second, because I think that model largely exists in too many companies today, where the solution to the problem is take people that work, 250, 275 days a year, doing something for 8 to 10 hours a day, and send them off to a 4-hour program and then their world will change and we never have to touch it again, right? And clearly that doesn't work.
Yeah, and that's just it. I mean, it's funny. I just did some work in the last couple of weeks, but companies are going to spend almost $1 billion in the U.S. this year on training. I mean, that's a staggering number, and they seem to be convinced, like you said, that if you put them in a training event or a 4-hour, 8-hour, or even worse, a 2-day sort of off-site that puts people to sleep, that you're going to change their world. I think if you look, I mean, we've been working with a lot of different companies now over the last 10 years and sort of surveying and researching. And what's most interesting is that many of those training events that companies are putting on actually reinforce with the associates that they have to just maintain status quo. And it actually has a negative impact on their interest in learning more. And I think that leads to the sort of a bigger issue for many companies is that, you hear so many companies complaining about their employees not wanting to change. It all goes hand in hand. The companies that invest the most in training, which means they're constantly challenging and create that mindset with their employees about learning, I think are set up best to be able to change because, when their employees are constantly learning and growing, this idea of change isn't so scary. But when you put someone in a 8-hour class and teach them a bunch of lecture to them for 8 hours, just like you did at school, and all those bad sort of experiences and came back from all those years ago, they just shut down. And once you shut down and you get into that status quo, it's very hard for organizations to suddenly then roll out some sort of change program when everyone's basically going, yeah, it's not going to happen.
So let me ask you this. I mean, you're in the business of providing, I don't want to call them training solutions because it just sort of negates what we said there, but interventions and solutions to organization to up their game from both a cultural perspective as well as a customer service experience level. You said that companies that invest a lot, what are you looking for in an ideal client? How do you know when you're talking to a prospect or client that they're serious and that they're going to be a good fit for you and they understand that this is more than an event or a transaction and they're willing to make that investment of time? What is it that you're looking for as the provider?
Well, I think it's interesting. And again, you know me fairly well. So this has taken a long time to sort of get across to me. So, I think what we hit on as a company, I was one of the culprits of delivering training events. So, we were delivering these events we had to deliver a lot of events. As I said, it took a lot of effort, a lot of work. And what we realized is we were part of this kind of feel good moment where everyone feel good for 2 seconds, and then basically we're complaining, well, why isn't this working more? So it's interesting that our company's now evolved where we do a lot less training and a lot more consulting. And what we're doing is that companies come to us, from across all industries and ask us, and they sort of say, okay, how are we going to improve our customer experience? We've got to get our scores up. We know the service profit chain works, et cetera, et cetera. And so our first question to them is we go, fantastic, let's talk about your culture. And they sort of look at us sideways and go, oh, no, we want to just do training. And I'm going, that's great, but training is just one of the mechanisms that is ultimately going to improve your customer experience. And I'm going to let you in on the secret that training for your employees is one of the last things you'd want to do because of so many other elements that have to be in play. And so your answer to your question of like, well, what does a company look like is when they suddenly look to us and they go, you know what? We've been wondering about culture, but we weren't quite sure how to approach it. And as a result, we're having, our success in the last 2 or 3 years particularly is really elevated when we've gone beyond just providing training events, but actually talking about bigger picture.
So how do you pivot that, right? Because the client comes to you with the quote presenting symptom of, oh, we need to improve our customer experience levels because there's some data point that tells them that, right? They just got some bad net promoter score or something like that. And they're expecting the answer to be what every other service provider would be. Yeah, we've got a half day on the customer experience or, the blowaway experience or creating the Ritz-Carlton level experience, whatever. And you totally change the conversation and say, yep, in order to do A, you got to go to culture, right? And that's not what they were looking for, right? But it's the prescription that you as the expert are prescribing. How do you get them to sort of come along on that journey with you? Because it's a big mind shift for them.
Yeah, and it is. But again, we're fortunate enough I think we're in a time where people are starting to understand, listen, everyone hears this word culture, but quite honestly, they don't know what it means half the time, but they know that it's something that they should probably be working on. So it's interesting when they go, all right, let's talk about culture. And I think this is where my experience in Ritz-Carlton, it comes up time and time again. When I worked at Ritz, every day, we pretty much talked about a very simple, it's an old hospitality axiom, which is called a truth. And that truth was an employee with a great attitude delivers great service, an employee with a bad attitude delivers poor service. It's very, very basic and simple, but it's been around forever. We basically have elevated that and we said, okay, let's talk about your customer service. In your mind, what we were coming in to do is provide more service skills. And I'm going to probably tell you at a guess, based on our experience, that pretty much all your employees have been through some sort of service training at least probably 10 to 20 times, depending on their tenure. And I'm just going to say, I'm not going to do that again because quite honestly, it's pointless. And I can tell you that from the Ritz-Carlton, and in fact, a lot of other very successful organizations, it's less about service skills and more about service attitude. And I think this is where we start to make the connect, because then they set up a little bit straighter and they go, well, what's service attitude? And I go, it's like anything. It's how they feel when they're about to interact with a customer. And I said, now that's where culture is, because culture is really by definition just the collective mindset of your employees. And so what I want to understand is that if you want to provide great service, then you need to make sure that your employees have the right mindset coming to work. And that mindset isn't just about customer service. It's actually about how much effort they're going to put in today. With our younger generations, it's whether or not they're going to stick around with you. And I go, all of this takes to the bottom line. But if we go back to just talking about customer experience, then I can tell you, and I can tell you from the best companies that do this the best customer service, and I can put it on, usually in the room, I'll ask everybody, I'm like, tell me about your best or worst customer experience. And they'll start to talk about it. And I go, was it really about skill or was it all about their attitude and personality? And all of a sudden I go, the most important thing for me when it comes to great customer service is, are you hiring the right people? Are you onboarding the right people? Are you recognizing them, incentivizing them right? Are you getting the people that shouldn't be taking care of your customers out at the right time? And so I say, these are all the things, these mechanisms that are influencing culture. And I said, listen, at the end of the day, we will provide some type of training. I just do not believe it's the type of training you're expecting. And what's most interesting, if you look at our number one service training delivery in the last year, it was about stress management. And what does that mean? As I said, what we've understood is that, for the most part, one of the biggest challenges in very stressful environments with employees that deal with a lot of customers simultaneously is that it gets quite stressful. And so what we're trying to do is kind of trying to shift. And the real challenge for customer service organizations is to help relieve stress, help that mindset or that attitude to be maintained throughout their shift. So
the complaint in hospitality isn't that you use you put the salad fork to the left and it should be to the right or whatever the case is, right? That's not what the gist of the complaint is. The server didn't care. He was gruff or, was disengaged or whatever the case may be. So let's sort of move the journey now to you sort of change your thinking on how to improve customer experience levels and customer service at organizations and move it from training to touching on culture. And then there might be times you go back to training. Then you decide to write a book on culture, right? So you did Culture Hacker. What was that experience like? Because a lot of our folks listening today either have written books or in the process of writing a book or thinking about it. Share with us your Culture Hacker, behind the scenes at Culture Hacker, if you will.
Yeah, well, as I said, I'm probably going to ruin the book writing experience maybe. Listen, as I said, I wrote a book. Okay, why did I write a book? One, because no one else was writing that book. And it's one of the things that I've come to sort of learn, and I talk about it a lot, is like culture is not an HR thing. Yet for many organizations, they basically put the responsibility of culture on the HR team. And so therefore, you've got lots of HR sort of people surrounding the sort of circling the wagons that they're very protective of culture.
Which means they're the ones getting the nasty email from the boss when the employee engagement survey comes in bad.
Yeah, they are. But what the problem is, they're not getting the nasty email from the customer. And I think this is where the big disconnect is. So, what's most interesting is when we're brought into an organization, it's not from the HR group, it's from the ops team. And this is where you start to get that disconnect, is that in most organizations, culture is an HR institution. It's protected. And I don't blame HR either, by the way, because it's the most fun part of their business. Gets them out of the administrative way. But let's face it, most of them are snowed under with administrative and legislation and all these other things. They actually forget to talk about and focus on people. So the reality is that they're protective of it, and the ops team are kind of going, hey, I kind of get what this guy's talking about. It's like, you know what, if I could just make my employees feel a little bit better, immediately our scores are going to sort of go up through the roof. And I think this is the piece that we started to get to, is that it has to be an operations focus. And so the idea of culture, it's funny when you sit in a room and you're sort of presenting this out, you have everybody nodding, and all of a sudden the HR person who thought they were coming in to tick off on a training program realizes that someone's about to get into their protected space, start to sort of upset things. It really is an interesting dynamic. So the HR team needs to be more connected with the operations team, is one of the most fundamental elements that we bring to the table. And so when I wrote the book, I'm an ops person. I wrote it from an operations perspective. I'm like, here's what you can do as an operator to actually make your people feel good. And it's not rocket science. It doesn't cost millions of dollars. It's actually relatively simple. So I wrote the book, and again, I'm not a writer, as you probably know, but what I started to do is I was just writing blogs, and I was given some good advice that, hey, just start writing a blog a month and make it a chapter of the book, or at least the outline. And we sort of did that. And, after 12 months, we actually had 13 chapters written, pretty good synopsis of the chapter. And my marketing person at the time says, you know what, let's just send this out as an exercise. I'm like, yeah, sure. I'm like, not thinking that anybody's going to pay some interest to it. But, I think the topic, I think the angle coming from sort of my background and the fact that we've worked with so many kind of big companies, like there was some interest. So we ended up writing a book by default. And, it was kind of interesting that as a speaker, people out there, as a speaker, people want you to have that book because it's kind of like your stamp to the big boy class. But more importantly for us, it's become by far our best marketing tool. And I think that's where, I do a lot of speaking. We've done the TV, but at the heart, we're a business, and our consulting business, as a result of the book, I think what it does is it creates interactions, conversations. It's a talking point. It's a fantastic sales tool. The fact that you turn up to meetings or before, people are interested and you send them a copy of the book. There's a great kind of, this person might know, what they're talking about. And I can tell you, as you said, it's been, just under 18 months since the book came out. And in that time, we've got two massive consulting projects.
That's where I want to go, Shane. So I think you've always had a long-term view of the business and how you operate. Most people, I shouldn't say most, many people come off of a book depressed. And what I mean by that is, they put all this effort and energy and time, and they're proud of it and all that sort of stuff. And, 6 or 8 months later, they sold maybe a couple thousand copies and the world really hasn't changed. But, given that it's been 18 months, the book is no longer sort of, you're not in book mode anymore, right? Book mode is 3, 4, 5 months when you're launching and it's sort of new and you do the blog tours and you do all that sort of stuff. Now it's integrated into how you operate, and you're getting into higher ticket, bigger level engagements that are more consultative than the commodity side of the training market. Seems like that's the big game changer for you.
Yeah, and it is. And I think, you touched on it big. I was never caught up in the book mode. And I think, as you said, I think probably some people get too caught up with the book. It's an ego piece. Maybe it was the fact that I'd done a television show and my ego had already been just pretty much destroyed by bad reviews and all that sort of stuff. But I was never in the book mode. We never came out with that because, as I said, I'm not putting my career on being a writer. I enjoy speaking, and I'm fortunate enough to speak around the world. But I don't go, I'm a speaker. What I end up being is I'm a business person that just happens to enjoy a lot of these mediums around thought leadership and being able to share my message because I love that. But at the end of the day, what the focus was, and again, the hope was, is that this was another way to get my message out. And, I do a podcast, and, I do TV segments, and I go, each one of those mediums is just a way to get the message out. And as you said, you know what? When you sell a few thousand copies of a book, you might hit that right person. And whether it's your video, whether it's your blog, in some way, all we've ended up doing, whether it was a strategy, but what we've done is we've created many different ways in which someone can hear our message. And listen, I'm not for everybody, but if somebody kind of comes across a video, or maybe the book picks it up in the bookstore, that's happened. And what I can say is that out of all of the pieces that we have working, and we have a lot of stuff working, is that the book has produced the two big pieces and it was based on the fact that what we did was apply a very operational piece. And I think that was where businesses become most comfortable, because I think we become, I can sort of fall into the category, become too human resource focused, too philosophical focused, too book focused. And I'm like, you got to stay business focused if that's what you want to be. And that's what obviously we wanted to be at the time.
Sure. So let me unpack some of the things that you said there because I think they're really key. Number one thing that you said is I'm not for everyone. So I think and I love that. And you're clearly not for everyone, which is why you're successful, right? So if a traditional or sort of conservative HR prince, oh man, he uses the F word or he doesn't think the way we do. And it's like, okay, well that's fine. Then go have another cup of tea. I'm not your cup of tea, right? I think one mistake that people make earlier on is, oh man, I don't want to offend and I want to please everyone and I want to serve everyone. And you dilute it to the point where it's commodity. There's nothing to it, right? And the fact that you have a distinct style, you have a distinct perspective, you have the gravitas and the experience to talk from it, and you know that you're not for everyone is awesome. Second thing that you said that I think was key is all these different mediums that you do, whether it's television, the book, talking head on CNN or whatever the case may be. It's just another place to get someone in the door, right? It's if the first touch point is a blog, great, come on in. If the first touch point is they picked up the book at the airport or the local bookstore, whatever the case is, come on in. And you don't know exactly where they're going to come from, nor does anyone. So you've got to put your markers everywhere. So anything you would add to that?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And here's the piece that I think I've discovered is that, I'm going to use the book, and as I said, I wrote the book as 13 blogs. So the blogs were written 2 years ago, maybe even three, some of the first ones. I've repurposed that content so many times, which means, I think one of the learning lessons is that I've done and that we're getting, I think, a lot better at is getting very good at repurposing content. It doesn't have to be all original. I keep coming back to, I've used the blogs. I might go back in, or actually someone from my office might go back in and touch up the blog and add some latest research and send it back out to the world again. So,
but even the repurposing, Shane, I think it's key because I talk about this a lot. Is that oftentimes a thought leader or a creative thinks, oh, I've got to create new and new and new and new, and I have a machine that has to create content, and it's like, well, maybe not, right? And this repurposing for some creatives feels not gratifying or feels lazy. But if you know that, thanks to the internet, the world is a laboratory that gives you data. So if you put out a blog or a piece or whatever, and it worked well for people, right? So you did a blog and for some reason that got more comments or whatever the case is than other blogs. What was in that one that you could use again and again and again and repurposing it across multiple formats as opposed to going back and starting from the drawing board? And I think some people just don't feel comfortable doing that. But I think, to your point before, you're a business person first, and then second, you're a thought leader. So to you, I would imagine the repurposing is really just an efficient use of resources, time, energy, whatever.
yeah, and again, what's the most important resource? And again, whether it's a business person or thought leader, it's my time. And I think I can tell you, you know me very well. I've been horrible at this over the years because I have been in that situation where I thought it was all about me. And again, to a certain degree, I still do have that sort of sits at the back of my mind, but it's just not effective. It's not. You can't grow a business with that philosophy, and it doesn't matter what the business is. If you're the only thing that's the business, it's a pretty low ceiling. So I think you've got to be able to do that, but I think you just got to be smart with the content, which means repurpose, and have your content. I say it broad enough. Like we have a whole library of content right now on very broad subjects that if tomorrow there is what did we just use it on? So I have a thing on unions that I've written about or we've done. I'm like, if something breaks tomorrow in the news about unions, we've got a video, we've got a blog, and I can go and do 3 lines on Twitter and some of the other mediums, and all of a sudden I have now responded to that. So one of the things that we created was some very generic content, some broad videos that we are repurposing when a topical issue comes up, something that's relevant, in the news media. We're always developing those, and we have that library. And then that takes the pressure off because now I got my team that sort of says, hey, there's the unions or Starbucks today. Starbucks is a great one. Just came out today, the report about, they have to rethink their training. And there was a number of recommendations came down. We did a video on training, a video around diversity, and even a video on what we thought of Starbucks. We had this stuff sitting in the bank, months ago. And I'm like, great, we got it all. Just send it out again.
Right. So it's that creating content with an evergreen lens and also knowing that you can just tweak it just a little bit to make it so topical, right? Because that Starbucks piece that you did 3 weeks ago, probably not all that relevant, but because of external circumstances, you take it off the shelf, polish it off, add a little, zip to it, and now it's as if it was created just in that moment without the fire drill of having to create something in a reactive mode to something going on in the marketplace.
Yeah, and I think the other piece is that, as I've looked at my team that I have here, anything that I post, they capture, which means they've got a ridiculous amount of library because as a thought leader, I get quite I'll just rant or I'll get on Twitter about something I'm funny. I sit in my office and I go, I just want to do a video. So we have a little setup. I'm like, I'll knock a video out. So, but what my team is really good at is even though it's reactive for me or I put some ideas out, they capture it all and they use it and repurpose it and they take it in different ways. And probably one of the best ones is that because I have so much content, we are now able to respond to articles, journalists, really quickly and easily, sometimes without me even having to touch it because we've got the content and the point of view already downplayed. So yes, while it builds up over a period of time, my biggest thing is like that content, you might have just done a Twitter once or send out an Instagram or there was an image. I'm like, this library that you have has to be organized, has to be managed, and then hand it to someone that obviously, who gets you, who can now spread and suddenly quadruple your time so effectively. I think that's obviously thought leaders, most successful ones do that a lot better than I do. But for me, it's been that learning lessons, particularly in the last year and a half with the book, that I think's really grown.
And it takes that burden off of you. So let me, as we've got to start wrapping up here. So let me just ask you as we wrap up, because there's been so much information here. Give me one really dumb thing that you've done that you tell people not to do that. And then something that you're doing now that's really working well that you might not have thought would have been working as well as it has.
Yeah, I was going to say there's so many dumb things that we do, but let's again back into thought leadership. The dumbest thing, and it's not it's a thought of mine that I have to do everything, that I have to control everything, that I have to approve everything. I know I've gone through that state. I have to speak to everything. At the end of the day, as I said, it's the toughest mindset we have to get over. We have to get over ourselves. We have to use our time focusing on the stuff we're meant to, which is thinking and putting some ideas out to the world. Admit it. When you get so caught up. So that the dumb. And again, I don't know. It's a process you have to go through. But I think it's like everything. The dumbest thing is continuing to believe that you have to do this on your own. And the most exciting thing we're working on right now is that we've done really well is again with the book. The book was this and again, it's many ways unplanned event that we're now like, we don't want to waste it. So as a result of that, we've really, I think, got our content a lot better aligned. As I said, we're repurposing very smartly, and we're now getting involved into the next phase. I love getting out there speaking, which I do a lot of, but getting back into the TV. We did TV first time around was kind of reality and crazy and a lot of fun. This time we're being, invited into actually comment, which for us is really, for me, is very, very gratifying because it allows me ultimately to have that voice. So, strategically looking again at all those different angles is just a different way to send the same message out is exciting because as you said before, you're not sure which one is going to pick it up, but they are picking it up. And I think that's, as a thought leader, you can't just rely on being at Twitter and getting tons of followers and think that's going to be it. You've got to really try and strategically start to look at yourself and how do you get in as many of these different distribution channels as possible.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing so much with us today. I feel like I'm going to go back and listen to this one 2 or 3 times because it's packed full of real nuggets and real goodies here. But thank you so much. Thanks for joining us and sharing with us.
Always a pleasure to talk, man.
Oh, great. And just tell people where they can find you. How do people shoot you an email or get in touch or find SGEi?
Yeah, listen, as I said, create the conversation. I'm in all the usual places, Twitter, Facebook page and all that, but just go to shanegreen.com. Just reach out to me, Shane, SHANE, at shanegreen.com. Have a conversation. I think that's what I am most committed to doing, particularly those of you out there that are, struggling a little, because I can tell you I was doing the same struggle and the same dumb thing. So have a conversation, Shane at shanegreen.com. Check out the website. And as I said, keep the conversation flowing.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Shane.
Thanks, man. Take care.
To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.